So I'm here for talking about this link in between unity and diversity. How does it sound to you? Do you have any idea if some of you has a particular direction would like to go to? Or you're just quiet listener? Yes, sir.
I just guess that unity is expressing and discovering itself through diversity in some kind of manifestation, and there's some kind of feedback loop. Briefly.
Mm-hmm. As we are, you might have noticed, human beings, we are using a lot of words trying to communicate. But it's quite always difficult to be clear when you communicate. Because we have a thought and we try to express it through words, that there's some, and already there is not so easy, that what you mean is precisely what you say, what one say. And on the other side, there is at least one person, but here there are quite many, who are doing the same. They listen and they translate into their understanding. So it's very difficult to know, to be sure that in human communication, we are really communicating. It's very, very difficult to be sure of it. And one thing which is very important is about listening. That is, when we listen, is it possible to listen without reactions? That is, listening and as a watcher, as a listener, which doesn't react, but who perceives what one hears and what one reacts within, but not giving any value to the inner reactions. Do you understand this? Could we try this for, I don't know how long we have, half an hour? Maybe less because I was late. So this big topic, science and non-duality, when it comes to diversity and unity, we have to kind of describe what we mean by all these words when we're talking about linking also. I will try to be as clear as possible about, on one side, what I perceive of the studies, the Indian studies I follow since more than 40 years now, and the general understanding that we have in the West. When we're talking about diversity, we're talking in India what they call Shaktis, or I say it with plural, several Shaktis, or what we today here call energy. We are a little short with words in the West because we only have this word, energy. For example, in the Nidra tradition I'm studying and teaching, we have 210 different words for energy, which are explaining very in detail the different kind of activities we are working on. But in English, we have only this word, energy. And we can understand it as a movement. Everything that moves is moved by something that we call an energy. And now there are different, quite many qualities, we could say, of energy. And once again, we have only one word in English. Another word that is used in classical yoga, it is called prakriti, which is understood as nature. nature not like birds and flowers, but the whole natural activity of the universe. And we are one of them. And within the human being, there are, again, many different activities. Suppose you understand this, like, digestion and seeing and thinking. All these are activities, and sleeping. Now, mostly, another word, it was yesterday told by Mark Dikovsky. This word is Shakti in Sanskrit. Now, when we're talking about science, most of the time, science studies the movements, whatever they are, organic, biological, astronomic, whatever it is, it's always about studying a movement. That is called, in Sanskrit again, different kind of energies. On another side, what we generally mean when we think about unity, we translate it as consciousness here, pretty often. In India, in the Kashmir Shaivism, it is called Shiva. In the classical yoga, it is called Purusha. And spirituality mainly study that state, unity, or tries to. All the texts are talking about this, a state of unity, from which all the movements are happening. Now, this state of unity is also understood as steadiness, where there is no movement. So on one side, we have this extraordinary number of activities, movements, energies, and on the other side, there is this oneness which is steady and doesn't move. And here comes the big question for all of us. Is it possible to live an active life with the perception of no division? You understand that activity means division, because there are many, many different fields of energies, and stillness means no division. So for us as human beings, which is a mystery, as is written on all the different bags you received, we are a mystery, but there is no but. We are a mystery, and simultaneously we perceive a possibility of no division, being complete, live a complete life. That is, the perception is full, is entire, is complete. That within the perception there is no division. And having all the experiences that we are facing, jobs, love affairs, food, and, the whole movement of life. So here comes the big question, which is the question of non-duality. Is it possible to live a life where there is simultaneously this response to all situations and a perception of steadiness and full completeness, fulfillment? Is that possible? Remember yesterday, at the introduction, it was about, at first, saying we're not here for giving answers, we're here for questioning together. Do you remember that? That's what you said. So, what is non-duality? In the point of view of the Indian tradition, there are three different main paths in Shivaism. One is called dual, that is, you're the sensation that where you are, you're not satisfied, and there is another point to reach, which is further. This is duality. Then there is something called non-duality, where it's very simple. There's no teacher, there's no student, there's no teaching, there's nothing. And there is a third strange path, which makes both of them, which says every step that you do, you're going somewhere, but at the same time, you are nowhere. That is the path you are making. By path, I understand the life. Our life is made, each and every path. But in each and every path, the wholeness of life is inside. So simultaneously, there is movement and non-movement. So you have to choose, which is a big, big difficulty whenever we have to choose. But now, if we're talking about the link in between Shiva and Shakti, or consciousness and, how did we call it? Energies. What is this link in between? And what I mainly studied was how to build this link. Because once the link is there, the job is done. If we are very much interested into diversity, we go to science. There's a lot of choice. If we are interested into unity, we go to spirituality path. Here again, there are many of them. Now, if we're interested in the relationship in between, we don't have to go anywhere. That's pretty cheap. And now, we have to understand one thing. If one wants to achieve whatever, that person is looking for something. This is from the beginning duality. There is me looking for something. Let's call it this me, the perceiver, and this something, the perceived. There is something in between. We call it perception. That is something which links this thing that I call me, even if I have no idea of what it is, what he is or what she is, whatever. We have no idea of what is me. And we have an idea of what this me would like to reach. So there is a movement in between. Linking is about inquiring into this movement, into the process of perception. The process of perception is built upon 6 different points. The 5 senses plus the mind. When we study into the 5 senses, just to let you know that 1 year ago we made a study with EEGs, with a group of scientists from Pisa, and with students who had about 20 years of practice on Nidra Yoga. So, once we start inquiring into the process of the 5 senses and the mind, we have to be very, very clear. This is where the linking can be cleared. Whatever we experience with the 5 senses, for most of us, it is always conditioned by the past. Do you understand this? That is, for example, you go to the dining room, there is a big choice of different dishes. Thank you for this. And everyone takes what he wants, what she wants, and then you listen at the table. And some people, they say, this one is not good. And the other ones say, the same dish is very good. It has, of course, nothing to do with the dish and nothing to do with the cook. Let's thank the cook. It has to do with our sensitivity, our perception. So at first, when we are not very deep into the inquiry, we say, this is not good or this is good. By going deeper, we start, saying is very important because what we say modifies what we think. And what we think modifies what we say. So if we slowly develop the perception that I like it or I dislike it, it has nothing to do with the dish itself. It has to do with me. Now, suppose you inquire a little deeper, we realize that what I perceived, what I like or what I dislike, is completely depending on my past, on the, let's say, the taste education I had. When you travel to India for the first time, it's very difficult to like or dislike. Or recently I was teaching in China. It is the same. It's very difficult to know if you like or if you dislike because you have no reference. You have no idea of what is in your plate. It's again a mystery. Not only human beings, but food also is a big mystery. And because let's say the tongue and the palate and the whole tasting process is not conditioned to such tastes. Now, this conditioning are deeply rooted into some areas of the brain. This is the study we did. And we have what we call the sadhana, the practice is about deconditioning some areas of the brain. Because through this conditioning, we built up what we call education, and we feel educated. But the moment you go into another culture, your education doesn't work very much, especially if the culture is very different. If you go from Switzerland to Austria, it's okay. But if you go from France to Africa, that's another thing. Now, the five senses are conditioned. So is it possible to have a sensation, five senses? Is it possible to have a sensation which is not conditioned? Can we have the brain areas which are conditioned by all the sensations? Can we have them totally silent? Remember, it is about inquiring into the linking process in between diversity and unity. So it's about the five senses. And doing that sadhana, that is practice, into that direction. There are thousands and thousands of exercises for this. Now, the second part is the mind. It is not a scoop that the mind is conditioned. That is, whatever we perceive. When I say perceive or perception, I include the five senses and the mind. When we're talking about the senses, we say sensation. Now, the mind, we might understand it through two different aspects. One is the practical thinking. That is, for coming here, you took planes or cars or buses or trains. This is very practical. And most of the time, practical thinking doesn't bring any trouble. Now, when you look at the map, you might say to yourself, my God, that's going to be difficult. This is the psychological thinking. This is the one who brings troubles. The practical one doesn't. And the shifting from one to the other is very often and very quick. We all know that the psychological thinking is also very, very conditioned. I don't think it is needed to give proof of example. All of us, we have read or known or studied whatever. We know quite well that the psychological thinking is conditioned. How to decondition the psychological thinking? As the different sensations are stored into brain areas, the psychological thinking is not into a particular area, it's everywhere. And we have discovered that around 200,000 neuronal connection every second. Every second, 200,000. So computers are really little things compared to this. This is why we can build them. Now, whatever event we face, we have 200,000 connections per second. Plus trying to understand. So most of the time, understanding is very partial, it's very limited. And we think, with the logical thinking, we think that what we know is real. But now, if we think with logical thinking, that is the practical one, a little deeper, it's very easy to understand that what we know, if it is real, probably is a very little part of reality. This is what science is talking about really often. So we are discovering more and more knowledge, but what we discover is that the more we know, the more we realize that there is a huge amount that we don't know and we have no access. Now, this link in between, it is possible to reduce the psychological conditioning. I don't think it is possible to delete it completely. But it is possible to reduce it. Now, while reducing, and there are exercises for this again, while reducing the sensation conditioning and the psychological conditioning, while reducing it, sometimes we experience a state of linking. We could translate yoga as linking. You know this. Putting together, joining, linking. So it is about purifying the process of sensations and bringing a state of silence into the psychological conditioning. This is possible when both simultaneously arise. A very strange process starts, which is action. Most of the time, especially in the West, we mix up action with movement. In this tradition, action is what comes at the very end. That is what we in the West call action. Most of the time is, we could say, it's a reaction. We have a perception, either with senses or understanding, or several of them simultaneously, and then we react. And then there is another way of looking at it, which is when there is no sensory response, and when the psychological mind is completely silent, the perception itself is acting. It looks like a miracle from the point of view of the conditioned mind. But in fact, it is the natural movement of creativity. Creativity being understood as not belonging to something or someone that could be limited. Creation has no limitation. Now, we have to understand one thing very deeply, is that we are this creation. It took millions of years to make people like us. And some of us, we have this funny idea that within the span of 50 years, we're going to change us. We're going to change ourselves. So it is not so much about changing ourselves. It is about having no sensory response and a complete silent mind, which together bring up the evidence that we are creation. And then there's no quest anymore. Suddenly, we are what creation is. And there's no question about creator. Because the very tiny moment, is, we could say, momentum, when this arises, the question of creation and creator, which is again duality, has vanished. So what is left is just a perception where there is no division at all. So all questions have disappeared, and you stay without any answers. Thank you.